Welcome back, chess fans! Today, we are in one of the most spectacular battles ever played on a chessboard. Garry Kasparov, the then world champion, faces the magnificent Veselin Topalov. What follows is a masterpiece of tactical genius, sacrifice, and sheer brutality. This is not just a game, it is Kasparov's Immortal game. Brace yourself, this is chess history at its finest. Let's dive in. Kasparov opens with the king's pawn, a classic start. Topalov plays the Pirc defense, a flexible but somewhat passive choice that allows white to take control of the center, while black plans counterattacks later on. Black typically fianchettos the dark squared bishop to exert pressure. Kasparov follows up with the classic central advance, supporting the e4 pawn and claiming the center. White is looking to dominate the middle of the board and control key squares. Topalov develops his knight to f6, attacking white's e4 pawn and preparing to support his center, a typical move in the Pirc defense. Black keeps the game flexible and allows Kasparov to expand while looking for counterplay. Kasparov develops his knight, attacking the central d5 square and supporting the e4 pawn. This move also opens up potential for a later f4 push. Topalov fianchettos his dark-squared bishop, a hallmark of the Pirc defense. The bishop on g7 will eventually put pressure on the center and become a key defensive and offensive piece later in the game. Kasparov develops bishop to e3, supporting the d4 pawn and preparing to castle. This move also places the bishop on a safe square, ready to coordinate with other pieces. Topalov places his bishop on g7, directly opposing white's center and eyeing the long diagonal. The bishop's influence on the center will grow, and this setup provides strong potential for counterattacks. Kasparov prepares to castle queenside, while also supporting the bishop on a3 and potentially facilitating an exchange on h6. The queen on d2 also allows for a future push of f3 and e4. Topalov solidifies his central structure and prepares to develop his knight to d7 or b8. This move also prepares the possibility of a later d5 pawn push to challenge white's center. Kasparov solidifies his center and prepares to push e4 to e5, gaining space and making his central pawns more resilient. The move also opens up the possibility for a later g4 push to challenge black's kingside. Topalov pushes his b-pawn to gain space on the queenside. This move is part of his plan to create counterplay on the queenside, preparing to fianchetto his bishop more effectively or support future central breaks. Kasparov places his knight on e2 instead of f3 to free up the f1 square for his bishop. This also keeps options open for the knight to move to g3 or f4, improving piece coordination. Topalov develops his knight to d7, preparing for a potential c5 pawn break to challenge white's center. The knight may also move to f8 or b6 in the future, depending on Kasparov's moves. Kasparov develops his bishop to h6, initiating a trade and looking to weaken black's kingside. The bishop on h6 targets black's g7 bishop, an important defensive piece. Topalov captures the bishop, removing the pressure from his kingside. The exchange opens up the g-file, but black now has a more secure kingside with one fewer piece attacking it. Kasparov recaptures with his queen, keeping pressure on the h6 square and maintaining control over key squares on the board. The queen on h6 is well placed to support an attack on the kingside and prevent him from castling. Topalov develops his bishop to b7, aiming at the long diagonal and reinforcing his central structure. The bishop now supports any potential breaks in the center and can target white's pawns later. Kasparov plays a3, preventing any future knight or bishop invasions on b4. The move also prepares for the eventual b4 push to expand on the queenside. Topalov pushes his pawn to e5, taking advantage of the open center and challenging white's central pawns. It's an aggressive pawn break that puts pressure on Kasparov's position. Kasparov castles queenside, bringing his king to safety and placing his rook on the d-file. This move also supports the d4 pawn and prepares for the future involvement of his rooks. Topalov moves his queen to e7, preparing for future central breaks and potentially helping with kingside defense. The queen also supports the e5 pawn. Kasparov moves his king to b1, a typical safety move when castling queenside. The move avoids potential checks or attacks on the c-file and ensures his king's safety. Topalov plays a 6, preparing for a potential b5 push, or simply solidifying his queenside structure. It's a flexible move that prepares for further expansion. Kasparov retreats his knight to c1, preparing to reroute it to a more effective square like d3 or b3. The knight could play a significant role in the coming middle game. Topalov castles queenside, but this proves to be a critical mistake. Moving the king to the queenside leaves it exposed to Kasparov's strong attacking potential. White now has a significant lead in the position. Kasparov attacks black's c5 and a6 pawns, while also improving the knight's position. The knight on b3 supports potential threats against the queenside and center. Topalov captures white's central pawn, opening up the center and giving him some space. Kasparov captures on d4, putting pressure on black's position. This creates open files and targets the exposed black king. Topalov tries to break open the center with a pawn push, aiming to activate his pieces. Kasparov centralizes his rook, keeping pressure on the d-file and preparing for potential breakthroughs. The coordination of rooks is building toward a deadly central assault. Topalov develops his knight to b6 to support the c4 and a4 squares. He hopes to bring reinforcements closer to the center and queenside, but it's a passive move compared to the dynamic threats Kasparov is posing. Kasparov makes a quiet but vital move. This supports the f4 square, and more importantly, clears the path for his bishop to f1, adding pressure to the long diagonal. Topalov tucks his king away, but the danger is already on his doorstep. This defensive move comes too late to handle the coming storm. Kasparov hops the knight into a threatening square, eyeing b7 and c6. However, this move slightly misplaces the knight and gives black a chance to regroup. Topalov retreats his bishop, aligning it with the dangerous diagonal a8 to h1. Now both sides are fully mobilized. The battle is about to explode. Kasparov enters an attacking piece, activating the bishop on the long diagonal. Topalov attacks aggressively in the center. This is the correct objective move, challenging white's central control and opening lines. Now Kasparov plays the queen on f4 check. He plays the king on a7, and Kasparov develops his last piece, the rook, on e1. Now all of Kasparov's pieces are active. The rook. This knight is terrifying, the bishop is powerful, and the queen has a share of control. Topalov ignores all incoming threats, certain of his current advantage, and plays d4 to gain space and expel the knight. If the knight retreats to a2, he will die, and it will be difficult for him to return to the game, but Kasparov has a surprise prepared and plays the knight d5. He has a brilliant tactical plan in mind. Topalov takes d5 with the knight b, and Kasparov takes d5, threatening to take the queen with the rook after opening the file. The queen on d6. Now this pawn is unsupported, under tremendous pressure from the knight, bishop, queen, and rook. A guaranteed extra pawn. But Kasparov had a legendary surprise in store for us. Brilliant move rook takes d4, a crazy sacrifice from Kasparov's rook in exchange for a pawn. After Kasparov had previously lost a pawn, he now gained a pawn with this sacrifice. Let's see if he ignores the sacrifice and exchanges queens. White takes f4, threatening to capture the knight. Black recovers the pawn, and white captures the pawn on f7 and check. So here, after the rook, Topalov says, "No, I accept the sacrifice. I took an extra rook from you." Kasparov responds with another sacrifice, a brilliant move rook on a7. Another crazy sacrifice. If he accepts the sacrifice, he will lose the game. After that, the queen takes d4 with a check. Only move the king to b8. The queen b6 check. If he covers the check with the bishop, check with the knight on c6. Only move the king a8. Checkmate the queen on a7. If he covers the check with the queen, the knight on c6. Checkmate. So accepting the sacrifice would cause him to lose the game. What would he do? Let's see that covering with a rook would cause him to lose his queen, and likewise, covering with a knight would cause him to lose his queen. But Topalov saw all the moves and played the best move in the game, the king on b7. Putting Kasparov in a difficult position, he demanded the knight on a5 and the rook on e7. He already had an advantage with an extra rook. But Kasparov calculated all the moves and continued with the only move to maintain his advantage. The queen takes on d4 check. Now this king cannot go to these squares. Black has two options. The first is to cover the check with the queen and leave the knight's protection, so white regains one of its pieces with a check. If black continues and plays the king and captures a5, he will face b4 and lose his queen. If he covers the check with his queen, white plays a very legendary move, bishop e6. What is this move? If he captures the bishop with the pawn, he will face the rook and lose his queen. If he plays the best move, which is the bishop takes the pawn, white plays b4, protecting the knight and threatening to give black checkmate after getting rid of the bishop. White has absolute control, so after the queen on d4, black plays the second option and takes a5. Look at the board now. This is the second piece Topalov has taken from Kasparov, and he is threatening to take the rook. The move b4 doesn't give mate to the king, but Kasparov continues and plays b4 check, preventing the king from leaving here. The king's only move is a3. Kasparov continues and plays queen c3, the second best move. The first was the rook on a7. But the queen on c3 wants to checkmate on b3. Topalov takes d5 and prevents checkmate. But Kasparov continues and plays the rook on a7, wanting to checkmate him with a move. Oh, the madness on the board! Kasparov controls the entire game. Is it possible that Kasparov calculated all these amazing sacrifices and that they would lead to this situation, a two-piece attack on all of the opponent's pieces and an overwhelming advantage for himself? Yes. And he plays the rook on a7, wanting checkmate with a single move. Topalov cannot defend this checkmate with the queen because he will lose on the b3 square. He cannot defend it with the rook on d6, even though it would be a very logical move because he would be faced with the king's move on b2 and would be checkmate, for example, if he played any move. Queen b3 check, queen takes b3, c take b3 checkmate. So Topalov thinks and plays the best move, the bishop b7, preventing checkmate and allowing the rook to control the square, a8. Kasparov takes the bishop, and Topalov cannot take the rook due to the checkmate, so he plays the queen c4. He wants to exchange queens, leaving the knight on f6. The important thing for him is to eliminate the threat of checkmate and have good material to continue playing and competing. Kasparov takes the knight, also threatening checkmate on a 6. The king flees and takes a 3. Kasparov continues and takes a 6 with check. The king flees again and takes b4. And once again, the brilliant Kasparov, the imaginative Kasparov, plays the only great move that maintains his advantage, c3. After this check, Topalov has 4 options. The first is to go with the king to c5, where he will lose his queen after the c7 rook is check. Or he goes with the king to b3, and here also he will lose his queen after the white queen. a2 checks only move the king c3, the queen b2 checks only move the king d3, and here the bishop comes to f1 check and takes the minister, and things collapse even more. The third option is to take the queen on c3, and here he loses with an easy checkmate. Try to find it. The last option, and what was played in the game, is the king takes c3. Kasparov continues to play queen a1 check. Black moves the king to d2. The two kings are close together, can you imagine? And every move must be made with the utmost precision due to the extreme sensitivity of the position. Kasparov completes queen b2 check. Topalov responds with the best move, moving king d1 away from check and from the e-file, so as not to be exposed to attacks from white's rook. Now it seems that Kasparov's attack is over. The queen doesn't provide any check, and neither do the rooks and bishops. It's as if Topalov is telling Kasparov, your attack is over, and it's my turn to finish you off. But Kasparov finds a move out of nowhere, a move that demonstrates Kasparov's genius and strength, and why he's considered the best in history. Boom, super brilliant move, bishop f1. Wow, where did he get it from, and what does he want with it? Kasparov sacrifices the bishop on f1, demanding black's queen. If black takes the bishop, he will abandon the defense of c2, and white will complete it with a check. Only move, check, covered by the queen and checkmate. So after the bishop f1, Topalov didn't accept the sacrifice. But what will you do, Topalov? You can't even move your queen and abandon protection. But Topalov makes a legendary move and proves that he's also one of the best players, playing the rook d2. Oh my god, what madness! What brilliance! Topalov says to Kasparov, you want my queen and I want yours. And I left you an untouchable rook. I hope you take it. Because if he takes the rook, he'll lose after the queen a2. Also, he can't take the rook on d2 with a check, so he'll take black and continue and take the queen, because it will take black and create a terrifying pass pawn. Kasparov thinks, tries to find another solution to Topalov's madness on the board, and comes up with another option. He decides to use Topalov's weapon against him and play the legendary sacrifice of the rook d7. Wow, what an amazing sacrifice. Now black cannot take white's queen because the rook is pinned with the king. Second, white demands checkmate. Third, he also wants black's queen. What will you do, Topalov? The situation has become more difficult than before. Topalov responds and takes the rook on d7, demonstrating that he has no choice against all these attacks. He abandons his queen, wanting to compete to the last breath to see this crushing attack end. Kasparov takes the queen. Topalov continues and takes the bishop, and Kasparov takes the rook on h8. Now things are clearer, and Kasparov's dominance on the board has been translated. A queen versus a rook, and black has an extra pawn, will be troublesome for white, but Kasparov will know how to deal with this situation. Topalov is now trying to pave the way for the pawn, threatening to capture a pawn along the way. Kasparov moves the queen on a8, protecting the pawn. Topalov pushes his pawn forward, threatening to check it again and promote it to a queen. Now the queen a4 with check blocks the pawn's path. The king e1, white plays f4, f5 from black. King c1 stands in front of the pawn, blocking its path. Black plays rook d2, threatening to capture pawn h2. Kasparov plays queen a7, threatening to capture pawn h7, and also indirectly protecting his pawn. Now, nothing helps Topalov. If he captures pawn h2, he will face queen g1 in check and lose his rook. If he pushes his pawn, queen e3 is check. If he covers the rook, it's checkmate. If he pushes the king, he'll lose his rook. So, after queen a7's move, Topalov resigned, and one of the most wonderful and enjoyable games in chess history ends. I also enjoy analyzing and learning from it. I hope you enjoyed and benefited from it. Don't forget to like and share if you like the content.